Hello and welcome back to season 2 of Dynamic Duos, a Bradley O'Mahony podcast. And today I'm joined by Lucy Malarkey and Karen Faulkner from Positive About Inclusion. So first of all, ladies, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your organisation and what you do?
Yeah, shall I start?
You go first.
So Positive About Inclusion is an EDI, so equity, diversity and inclusion, consultancy and training provider. But I suppose, we describe ourselves like that, but it's more of a people-focused, organisational culture type company that we have. So we provide training, we provide consultancy to all sorts of different organisations in different sectors and across the country, really supporting them to create a more inclusive environment in which the people who work for them feel that sense of belonging.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of your clients?
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So I think when we set up the business in 2020, Lucy and I both have a social housing background, public sector. So when we started off, we kind of made the assumption that it was going to be predominantly that we'd be working with those types of clients. And there has been a lot of that, to be fair. But actually, we've been pleasantly surprised by some of the other clients that we have in the charitable sector. National charities. We've worked with local charities. We've worked with other voluntary community organisations, private sector, advanced manufacturing, barristers' chambers, like really...
University.
Yeah, university, so education.
So you
and
touch on quite a broad spectrum.
Honestly, really broad spectrum, and which is great because it means it's super varied, very interesting, and there's a lovely kind of insight that you get from working with these different organisations. You learn their lingo a little bit. Everybody's got their own way of approaching things, so you pick up a bit of that, which is great. But then you're able to compare and contrast from one kind of organisation to another.
We worked together with the North East Automotive Alliance on their pilot project, which was to encourage, disadvantaged people and those people who are out of work across South Tyneside to look at a career within the automotive and advanced manufacturing sectors. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you did within that?
Yeah, sure. So our part to play in that, and it was a bit of a team effort, wasn't it? There was lots of different organisations coming together to deliver this pilot project. The part we were asked to do was the employer engagement. Yeah. So we reached out to different employers in or around the South Tyneside area to speak with them and get their feedback and find out what kind of approach they had currently to making sure that their workforce, their workplace was as diverse as it possibly could be. In some instances, that meant actually we kind of gave them a bit of ad hoc advice and guidance as we went along. But what we did was we absorbed, I guess, the feedback they gave us and turned that into a session that we ran that was open to everybody that had been involved up to that point, where we kind of held up a mirror to them in terms of, here's the stuff that you're doing that's really great. Because there was a lot of good practice. When you speak to employers, they'll quite often be quite self-deprecating about how inclusive their workplaces actually are. So we held up that mirror to them to say, do you know what? This is what you're doing, which is really great. Try and maximise that. Try and do more of that if you can. And here's what we've identified that you could do that would just turn the dial a little bit in terms of making your workplace a bit more inclusive, a bit more attractive to people like you say who are furthest from the jobs market or going back into work, haven't had a long time off for health reasons or family reasons or whatever that may be. So we really enjoyed it, didn't we? It meant we had some great conversations with some people, mainly HR people. Mainly HR. But it was a great exposure to us in terms of what those organisations were doing and some of the good practice that was going on.
So which sectors would you say are making the biggest strides when it comes to EDI as well, or the most receptive to it?
Ooh,
That's
a big question.
really huge question. And I feel a bit like Bruce Forsyth when I'm going to say that. You know, it depends who we're speaking to as who we're going to. No, that's not true. But what is quite interesting, actually, because we do a lot of work still in the public sector. And I think there is... There's a feeling, isn't there, in that sector that actually the public sector must be doing better. Particularly, you know, so an area like social housing, you know, it's the roots are steeped in social justice. You won't find a housing organisation that doesn't have values that are really aligned to respect and inclusion. So I think there's a feeling we've got these values. This is our background. We must be doing best. But there's learning, as Karen said before, that definitely within the housing sector, you know, they can take from other sectors. So,
and I think when you've got an industry that's heavily regulated, usually, not always, but usually the regulator has some kind of eye on inclusivity.
Yeah.
You know, they might be doing some work in the background to get the gender balance right if it's a traditionally male-dominated environment, or if it's traditionally not a profession that people from a different ethnic background would go into. The regulatory bodies or the professional bodies usually have some kind of initiatives or projects or working groups. You don't find as much of that in a non-regulated sector.
Okay. So, moving on to politics. How do you feel about over in America? Donald Trump's been making the headlines, hasn't he, around EDI and the policies that he's been putting in place?
what's been so pleasing,
Encouraging
to see actually is almost a doubling down and a galvanization in response to that. You know, of organizations here saying we're going to do more, and we're going to do bigger, and we're going to do it better because this is important. So it you know, perversely, I suppose it's sort of having a bit of the opposite effect than perhaps he would want.
Yeah.
So what would a typical day look like for both of you when you're working with clients? What would typically be involved?
Do you know, there's
Very varied.
It is really varied, and I bet lots of people say that. But you know, some of our clients are in the region, some of them are outside of the region. I think setting up kind of in the midst of lockdown like we did, we got used pretty quickly to doing a lot of stuff initially virtually.
Right.
So having meetings with clients virtually, you know, trying to understand what their objectives were all about, what they wanted to achieve. Did they want a piece of research, or were they after something that was more like traditional training? So, and then delivering that virtually as well.
So, you know, when you talk about training there, what would that look like?
Well, it could be anything from a 1 hour online quick lunch and learn type session to a full day in person, away day with a board of trustees or governors somewhere doing a full diagnostic of their organisation. You know, what we try to do is really respond to what the client's needs are, and much as it's actually, you know, quite labour intensive, we do design everything from scratch. You know, everything is bespoke to the client's needs, so it's more about coming up with something that we know is going to do the job for them at the end of the day.
And I think that bespoke nature is really important. I mean, certainly, you know, I can remember when we worked for big organisations before, you know, they would bring people in from outside, deliver some training on whatever, and you would all say, oh, that was lovely. But then it wouldn't, if it wasn't embedded within the organisational values, if it didn't use the right language, exactly the culture, then it was just that. It was a nice half day or whatever. So we design everything so that it totally does use the language of that organisation. We'll use the values of that organisation, because otherwise it feels like a bolt-on for staff. You know, it doesn't feel authentic, and authenticity in this area in particular, of course, is really important.
So what are the biggest issues or challenges that organisations are facing and that they would bring you in for?
Well, again, I'm going to sound really repetitive. That totally depends. But I suppose, you know, this morning we've been working with an organisation who really wanted us to design something that brings some new regulatory guidance and a policy that they've created to life for all of their staff. So what they wanted, and they approached us because we've got a housing background and they're a housing client. So they wanted something that we could really tailor to housing using examples that, you know, we've got from having worked in housing to really bring a policy to life. So
I think, you know, what organisations are looking for is, you know, sometimes there's some difficult conversations to have, and you know, there are some expectations around how individuals should conduct themselves within an organisation, or what's the best way to make that workplace, whether it's an office or a shop floor or a factory floor, what's the best way to make that workplace as welcoming and respectful and inclusive as possible. Now, what people seem to value in us is that we can come in externally. So sometimes it's easier for an external person to have an honest conversation with people than it is for an HR person that's worked with them for 20 years and they've got a great working relationship. But we bring a bit of independence and a bit of validity because we've worked in lots of different sectors. But the stories that we share, the examples that we use, back to your point about this morning's client really wanting to focus on case studies and examples, stories are so powerful, and very often it's the stories and the examples that we share and talk about and discuss that people remember, and they'll go on to talk about afterwards when the session's finished and they go back to their desk or they go back to their workplace or whatever. It's the stories that they'll circle back to and use and refer to and remember and share with their family when they go back home.
Made them feel, isn't it? So
it's the feelings that it engenders, and you know, we make it okay for people to make mistakes because we are all human, and this is such a dynamic. You know, you mentioned about the US president, and you know, it's such a dynamic area that it's fine to make mistakes. So I think if you can share stories and examples that really demonstrate that, that's what employers are looking for, that's what clients are looking for. They want somebody to facilitate these discussions, but in a professional, safe way.
And what's next for the business as well in terms of growth?
Well, we've got lots of ideas, haven't we? I mean, well, we had another good one this morning. I thought it was quite a good one. Actually, I suppose what we have to be mindful of is toning it down sometimes, don't we? Because we can be keen to just go and do lots of things, and it's all very exciting, and you know, we think it really adds value, so we want to do more. Actually, as it happens, today is I actually wear two hats.
Right.
Today's my last day of wearing another hat, and I'm managing director for a national networking organisation called Women in Social Housing.
Yeah.
So after today, when I take off that hat, we will have more capacity to really, I suppose, spend some time thinking about that. And planning it.
Yeah, I think up to now, you know, the things that we've diversified into, or the growth that's come about, has been a bit organic and a bit responsive to what, you know, a previous 70% of our work comes from previous clients, and they'll come back to us and say, we really, you know, thanks for doing X, Y, Z. We'd really like you to help us now with something slightly different or very different, you know, and so what we've ended up branching into hasn't necessarily been what we've planned. You know, we've just kind of responded to that.
Because I guess, where did it come about, the business idea? Because you must have found a gap in the market, or...
A passion. It came from passion. So when we were working for the housing provider, neither of us worked in HR. You know, we had customer service delivery, engagement, bit of repairs and maintenance in there. Roles that always were operational delivery roles. But the passion was always EDI. So we had responsibility in the organisation. There wasn't anybody in HR who did it. So we did it. So it was a passion to make a difference.
It was the side hustle to the day job, really. It was a bit of a, you know, Lucy in particular kind of ran the agenda because it was something that was there was a passion for. And lots of people at the time said to us, do you know, you should, declare independence and go off and do this of your own volition type of thing. And at the time, you're working within a very comfortable hierarchical structure. So you think, oh, yes, that sounds very nice, but I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing.
With my pension and my
great
stability
holidays
and somebody else dealing with the IT.
And somebody else dealing with finance and IT and governance and compliance and all those other things. And so, as you were saying earlier, redundancy really did give us that bit of oh, right, okay, there's a real break in the journey here. We could either do something different, try it out and see what happens, or just go back to finding another corporate similar role, different organisation, and carry on down that journey, which would have been fine, but I'm pleased we took this route instead.
We couldn't go back now, could we?
No.
How do you differ as well in terms of style, in terms of working together?
Go on, you answered that one first.
We're really different.
So different.
We are very... So Lucy is massively creative, imaginative. She's a visionary, she really does. And there are no boundaries. So this is exactly what she means when we were just chatting this morning about, we had a conversation over here and a conversation over there, and those two conversations lined up to something. Lucy straight away, right, why don't we could definitely, and before you know it, she's volunteered to do something, she's set something up, and whoa, you're away. And my style is not that at all. She's imagination and I'm infrastructure.
Right.
So I'm the person who is squirreling away in the background, just like lining things up and sorting things out. I'm the detail person, the finance, the compliance.
Karen is what every good business needs. No, seriously though. And you're absolutely right that we work together so well because we are so very different. So Karen can bring me back down to earth sometimes. And I don't mean that negatively, in the best possible way. But, it's Karen that makes sure that we do everything that we need to do, I wouldn't know which box to tick on an HMRC page to sort out things.
But that's a good combination.
So what were your previous roles then? Because it was obviously totally different to this, was it?
I was director of customer.
Right.
And I was head of customer service.
Right. So it was still around people. And
still very people focused and very much managing teams, individuals who were there delivering a frontline service to some residents in some quite challenging circumstances. And I think when you look after people, when you manage people, that's such a learning journey, isn't it? And there's an awful lot of things that you pick up along the way there that maybe you don't even realise at the time, but they're skills that are so useful. But then pivoting into this has been an entirely different skill set. Skills that we didn't need before because we were part of a bigger hierarchical structure where somebody else looked after all of that stuff. Didn't they? And we've really had to, it's a steep learning curve, learn as we go, right? If there's a problem, there isn't somebody necessarily at the end of a phone who's there's
the
nobody,
IT help desk to say turn it off and on again.
To do that. So it has been a bit of a we've learned a lot as we go along, but I think we've learned the strengths and that we bring to that. There's things that I'll naturally take over. There's things that Lucy will naturally do. So
and I think we feel so privileged to work together, don't we? And have two of us. We've got quite a lot of, I suppose, people in our network, our friends, who equally took decision to set up their own business, but have done it as a sole trader, as a sole trader, on their own. And that is so much harder because we've got each other to be able to bounce ideas, to whinge at, in those days when you just want to go, to motivate each other.
I think the motivation thing's probably one of the biggest things, the level of resilience that you need
Yeah.
to run a business in these times is quite significant. And, you know, if you're working on your own, to keep that motivation and resilience going without other people to gee you on and encourage and support and celebrate with, I think is really difficult. We are very lucky that we've got each other in that respect.
Just going back to the range of organisations that you work with, so where would they typically bring you in? So would it be at the start of their journey when it comes to EDI, or would you be sort of in the middle, or where does it likely fall?
Do you know what? It varies. It varies a
keep
lot.
answering
I know
all
we keep
questions
saying
like
that, but I think for some organisations,
And do some organisations fear it? Are they a bit uncertain as to
Yes.
how
Yes,
imminent, if they do
100%.
anything wrong?
Yeah.
very nervous, really. And sometimes that is the point at which they think, right, we don't want to start this off on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
So let's get some independent folk in who can just give us a bit of reassurance and a bit of guidance.
And a steer.
And a steer as we take these kind of baby steps. Some organisations go at it too strong and it falls over a little bit. And so they back off and let things lie, and then they bring us in to do it again from a slightly different angle. Some organisations have done loads of work, brilliant stuff, imaginative, engaging, really galvanised their workforce, and then maybe they get to the point where, they're a little bit, what's next? We've run out of steam a little bit, or we've got a steering group and they've run out of ideas, or they just need a bit of oomph or a bit of something, and so they bring us in at that point to maybe just do a little session with the steering group to say, right, what have you done? Where would you like to get to? How could we get there? And to just give them
here are some ideas
Yeah.
from other places as well.
So it's so horses for courses, Sarah. It could be at any point in the journey, but the point that they bring us in really does influence how and what we would do in terms of working with them.
So just going back to the EDI journey, where are the opportunities and the real challenges that you're seeing?
Real challenges. I mean, what we're not seeing, I suppose we've said before, is we're not seeing a negative impact in the organisations who are talking to us and working with us from, what might be seen across the water. But all of that, I suppose, we work with the people who want to work with us. So already the organisations
on board with it. Got that culture
got
embedded
that
in.
commitment, even if they're not quite sure what to do, they know that it's the right thing to do. So it's quite a hard one to answer, isn't it, really?
It is. I think that the challenges are, even though organisationally people are galvanised, let's say, to do the right thing in response to what's happening in terms of America and other parts of the world. I think in this part of the world, we've had the recent Supreme Court ruling in terms of biological sex, how that's landed with the trans community. I think some organisations will want to get their approach to that right, understandably. And so I think for some subject matters, there's a nervousness around certain things. So there's some challenges there. But me, glass half full type person, would say, I think there's some opportunities there as well. That by setting the right tone and having the right type of conversation within your organisation, we've seen the benefits that can come from that. When people feel like they can be themselves, talk honestly about who they are, what their family background is, what their situation is. We've had some absolutely beautiful moments of people sharing things, choosing to share things, and their colleagues being blown away by their honesty and their openness and their authenticity. And you walk away from that group and you think, they've shared something really special, and that's brought them together even more as a team. And you can't put a price on that. I wish I could bottle it, because that's such a lovely feeling. The satisfaction we get from that is priceless, really.
And what do you like to do outside of work?
Well, I am looking forward to not doing two jobs. Yes, as at tomorrow, when I will have more time to enjoy things outside of work. So one of the things I've booked for myself for next week is to go and have a lovely tasting meal at the Baltic Six
Oh,
restaurant.
very nice.
Yes,
That'll be good.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that every day. That makes it sound like I'm going to be doing that every day.
So you're going to
The new
become a bon
lifestyle.
viveur.
I'm going to become a bon viveur. Exactly that, Karen.
For me, and we were chatting about this morning, weren't we? I'm, what am I now? 51, 52, and
Which are you, 51 or 52?
I'm 52, which is terrifying. You know, if you'd asked me 10 years ago what I did to relax, I would probably say that I eat and drink. You know, that bon viveur,
Which is what I've just
which is
said.
what you've just said, yeah. But now, you know, I like to do Pilates. I'm trying to start running again.
All right. Did you used to run previously?
I did, but not very well, Sarah. Honestly, it was a poor shuffle, you know, and I never did.
Well, as long as you're moving.
But I was moving. It was the loosest definition of movement you could possibly imagine. I've got a personal trainer who I see on a Sunday morning, and I think there's great value in movement. And I find that really helpful for me in terms of, you know, working mum. You know, I think we're all working mums, you know, keeping the balance right when you've got time. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for getting outside, fresh air,
definitely.
time with friends, you know, a long walk somewhere, possibly a cold glass of wine at the end. Can't ask for much more than that, really. Yeah.
And on a beautiful day like this as well.
Exactly.
What a journey.
Well, I think we could talk for a lot longer. But thank you very much for being guests, and I know that we'll hopefully continue to work together as well moving forward.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck
Thank you.
with everything.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Thank you.